Good morning everyone, Jackie here. Join Jackie on Mondays at 10. Sorry, I'm about 15 minutes late. Today we are talking about what is a conditional contract. And it's easy to talk about contracts in terms of buying and selling real estate because it's a transaction that a lot of people understand. So I'll use that as an example. But basically, a conditional contract is where you've entered into a contract but given yourself some thing that needs to be met before you're bound by the contract, right? So the typical process if you are purchasing a piece of real estate is that you might make the purchase conditional on you getting finance approval. Now, where a condition cannot be met, it's usually got a time frame where it needs to be met by. So if you can't meet it by that date, then you have the choice of continuing with the contract or ending it. If you end it, more than likely you'll get your deposit back. Certainly in the example that I'm using, sometimes in some contracts, not generally real estate, but we're talking about conditional contracts generally, there might be something that can't be undone, or you may have paid some kind of non-refundable deposit, but generally that is why you put a condition like that in. The contract becomes unconditional when those preconditions have been met and everyone is proceeding no matter what. So, example, again, purchasing a piece of real estate. You make it conditional on finance and your finance is due in 14 days. If you get your finance approved in 14 days, you let the other side know, yay, we've got our finance, we are proceeding unconditionally, okay? So that means our finance is organised, we are going ahead to buy this property. That same scenario, purchasing, conditional on finance, you have 14 days to get your finance. You haven't had your finance organised in 14 days. So you tell the other side, sorry, we don't have our finance. We're not going to go ahead because we can't commit to buying at the moment. We're going to sort our finance out and then we'll get back on the market. So the contract ends, you get your deposit back. The worst case scenario when people don't understand what a conditional contract is. So you, again, same example, you're buying a piece of real estate, conditional on finance in 14 days. You don't get your finance, but you don't let anyone know. The contract lapses to become unconditional because you didn't tell them at 14 days that you didn't have your finance. So the contract rolls over and becomes unconditional. It means you are stuck in that contract and you must settle. So you need to scramble and find that money to make sure that happens. Otherwise, you end up defaulting on the contract and then you can be sued. So that is why we have conditional contracts, preconditions on finalising a contract. And purchasing a piece of real estate is a great example. So the finance clause is really important. Some other conditions people sometimes have are like a building or pest inspection, for example. And what it's conditional on is a satisfactory report or a report that doesn't show any major structural damage. If a purchaser then gets a report back and it says those sort of things, and they get the report back within the time frame, they can then say to the vendor, well, the condition's not met, so we're going to end the contract, or it reopens up the whole deal for renegotiation. If the purchaser still really wants it, knowing the issues with the property, they could potentially renegotiate a price, or they have to be prepared to walk away because the property is not up to spec. So those are some really simple examples of preconditions on some contracts. Now, some other sort of preconditions might be on a different kind of contract. So if you're looking at buying a business, for example, you would make it a precondition based on having a look at the due diligence and the due diligence stacking up to meet your expectations. You'd probably still want it a precondition on finance if you were buying a business as well. So what you don't want to do is enter into an unconditional contract straight away quite often. So, and that's the opposite if you were selling something. It's preferable to try and get someone to enter into an unconditional contract because it means you're guaranteed to have sold. It means that you have certainty and you know that this is going to go ahead. What else about unconditional contracts? It's a safe way of being able to do some research, to do some extra due diligence or extra checks into a property. And in terms of finance, a bank is not going to give you approval unless you've got a contract. So you can go to a bank and you can get pre-approval, but it doesn't mean anything because it doesn't mean you can actually borrow that amount. They give you a pre-approval amount based on what your income is, but it's not based on the value of the security. So they want to see the contract, they want to see what the valuation of the property is, and they'll only lend up to a certain amount on the property. So it's a trap for first-time players in the market as well, that they think that they've got all this money that they can spend and then they don't actually, because they can't actually get the finance on that particular property. And certain properties, you can only get finance up to a certain percentage as well. So residential is the best. Commercial real estate, you can quite often only get up to 70% of the value. And quite often on rural properties it's less than that. So just as a recap, a conditional contract means that it's not guaranteed that it's going ahead unless the preconditions are met. Those preconditions might be something like finance has to be approved, or we have to do an inspection and a certain standard has to be met. So it's a protection basically for a purchaser to do their extra due diligence. If the precondition is not met and it is actually communicated, then the contract can end and a purchaser can get their deposit back. So I hope I haven't gone round and round too much in circles. I hope that has been fairly clear. If you have any other questions about it, please comment or direct message us on our Facebook page. If you think this is relevant for someone that you know, potentially a first homeowner who is preparing to buy something, it would be great if you tag their name in the comments or sent this via a direct message to them. All these videos I do live, but they do get saved onto the Facebook page on the videos tab, so you can go back and have a look at them when they're relevant. Otherwise, if there are any other topics that you want me to cover, you can let me know. The link to our website's also there, and all our direct emails are available from there as well. So I hope that helps. It's a bit of an insight into the difference between a conditional and an unconditional contract. And otherwise, look, I hope you have a great week, and I will see you again next week at Join Jackie with the short snippet of legal information Mondays. Catch you next time.